My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 41 years old, and the day my grandmother died, my family treated me like I'd already lost. Not because I wasn't grieving, because they thought I'd inherited nothing worth fighting over. The reading of the will happened on a rainy Thursday morning in a law office above an old hardware store downtown. My brother Marcus arrived in a tailored navy suit. His wife wore diamonds. My cousin Rachel carried a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. And then there was me, a divorced mother of one, a high school librarian, the quiet granddaughter who had spent every Saturday for the last 8 years driving 3 hours to visit Grandma Eleanor. I sat at the end of the conference table while everyone exchanged polite condolences. They didn't mean. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began reading. To my grandson Marcus Donovan, I leave my investment portfolio, including all stocks, bonds, and financial accounts. Marcus smiled immediately. To my granddaughter Rachel Harper, I leave my lakefront condominium in Asheville. Rachel squeezed her husband's hand. Then the lawyer turned a page. To my granddaughter Claire Donovan, I leave Blackwood Farm, including all structures, equipment, records, and contents located on the property. The room went silent. Then Rachel laughed. Actually laughed. Grandma left Claire the farm? Marcus chuckled. That's perfect. I stared at the attorney. Blackwood Farm? The old farm had been abandoned for nearly 20 years. 120 acres of overgrown fields, a collapsing farmhouse, and rusted equipment nobody had touched since I was a teenager.
It wasn't just worthless.
It was expensive to own. Property taxes, repairs, maintenance, liability. The kind of inheritance people usually refused, the lawyer continued. There is also a letter. My head lifted. A sealed letter addressed specifically to Claire. Marcus leaned forward.
What does it say?
The attorney handed me the envelope. You'll have to ask your grandmother. The room laughed. I didn't. Because Grandma Eleanor had never done anything by accident. Not once in her 90 years. I slipped the envelope into my purse, unopened. The lawyer finished the reading. Everyone congratulated Marcus. Everyone admired Rachel. Nobody looked at me. By the time we walked into the parking lot, my inheritance had already become a family joke. My brother slapped me on the shoulder. Hey, if you need help hauling junk off that farm, let me know. Rachel smiled. Or maybe sell it quickly before it falls down. They climbed into luxury vehicles. I drove home in a 12-year-old Honda. The whole way back, I couldn't stop thinking about the letter sitting inside my purse, but I didn't open it. Not yet. Because I knew my grandmother, and if she'd waited until after her death to tell me something, then whatever was inside deserved patience. That evening, my daughter, Emma, found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. She was 16, smart enough to notice things. What happened? I told her. She listened quietly. So Uncle Marcus got rich? Looks that way. And you got a farm? I nodded. Emma thought for a moment. Grandma liked you best. I laughed despite myself.
She loved everybody.
No, Emma said. She trusted you best. There is a difference. The words stayed with me long after she'd gone upstairs. Because Emma wasn't wrong. When Grandma needed groceries, she called me. When she needed rides to appointments, she called me. When she was lonely, she called me. Not because Marcus and Rachel were bad people. They were just busy. At least that's what they always said. Busy. Funny how the people too busy to visit become available the moment an inheritance appears. The following Saturday, I drove to Blackwood Farm. The property sat 20 miles outside town at the end of a gravel road, lined with oak trees. The gate sagged. The fence leaned. The fields looked wild. Yet something felt strange the moment I arrived. The grass near the farmhouse had been recently cut. Not perfectly, but recently. I parked and stepped out. The air smelled of fresh earth. Birds chirped from the trees. And somewhere in the distance, I heard machinery. I frowned. The farm was supposed to be abandoned. So who was using equipment? I followed the sound around the barn. A tractor sat near the rear pasture. Its engine was warm. Very warm. Someone had driven it recently. I walked closer. The fuel tank was half full. The tires showed fresh tracks. I stood there staring. Grandma had lived in assisted care for nearly 3 years. Who exactly had been maintaining a supposedly abandoned farm? That question followed me into the farmhouse. Dust covered most surfaces, but not all. The kitchen table was clean. One chair sat pulled out. A coffee mug rested beside the sink. Not dirty. Not clean. Used. Recently, my pulse quickened. For the first time, I stopped seeing the farm as abandoned and started seeing it as hidden. That night, I finally opened Grandma's letter. Her handwriting covered 2 pages. Claire,
If you're reading this,
then everyone is probably celebrating what they think they won. Let them. People often mistake value for price. The farm is not what it appears to be. Before you sell anything, before you sign anything, before you trust anyone, go to the Red Barn. Find the old grain ledger.
look behind the shelf.
Then call Samuel Pierce. Do exactly that order. Nobody else. Not Marcus. Not Rachel. Not anyone. Trust the records. Love. Grandma. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. Trust the records. That sounded exactly like her. Grandma had been an accountant for 40 years. She trusted paperwork more than people. The next morning, I returned to the farm. The red barn stood near the western field. Its paint had faded decades ago. The doors groaned when I pulled them open. Inside stood old machinery covered with tarps, stacks of feed containers, shelves lined with dusty ledgers. I found the grain records after 20 minutes. Then I noticed something strange. One shelf didn't reach all the way to the wall. There was space behind it. My heart started pounding. I pulled the shelf forward. A metal lockbox sat hidden inside. The key had been taped beneath the wood, exactly where Grandma knew I would look. Inside the box were property maps, tax documents, land surveys, and one thick folder labeled Mineral Rights. I sat down on an overturned bucket.
Mineral rights?
I opened the folder. The first document was a lease agreement. The second was a geological survey. The third made my hands shake. It was an annual royalty statement. Amount paid. Last year, $318,442s. I blinked. Then read it again. $318,000. For 1 year. The farm wasn't earning money from crops. It was earning money from natural gas wells located beneath part of the property. I kept reading. The rights had been leased over a decade earlier. Every year the farm received royalty payments.
Every single year.
The abandoned farm generated
More income than my brother's.
entire investment portfolio probably did. I sat there stunned. Then I noticed another document. Projected reserve estimates. The gas company expected production to continue for at least another 15 years. Maybe 20. My grandmother hadn't left me a dying farm. She'd left me a fortune disguised as one. And suddenly her letter made sense. People mistake value for price. The farmhouse looked worthless. The land looked neglected. But underneath it sat something priceless. I pulled out my phone, then remembered the second instruction. Call Samuel Pierce. The number was written on a sticky note inside the folder. An older man answered after 2 rings. Pierce, my name is Claire Donovan. Silence, then a laugh. Eleanor finally did it. You knew. I've known for years.
Known what?
That she'd leave it to you. I sat down harder. What exactly is this farm? Samuel sighed. The short version? Please. Your grandmother bought mineral rights nobody wanted in 1998. I listened carefully. People thought she was crazy. She mortgaged nearly everything to buy them. What happened? 10 years later, they discovered one of the largest gas-producing formations in the region. My mouth went dry. How much is the property worth? Samuel was quiet.
A lot more than your family thinks.
How much more? Last appraisal was just over 11 million. I nearly dropped the phone. 11 million. Not thousand. Million! I looked around the dusty barn, the broken equipment, the faded walls, the collapsing roof, and understood exactly what Grandma had done. She'd hidden wealth inside something nobody wanted, because she knew exactly who would chase appearances, and exactly who would take the time to look underneath them. Samuel interrupted my thoughts. Claire? Yes? There's something else. My stomach tightened. What? The royalty checks require a managing trustee signature. What does that mean?
It means until ownership transferred officially.
Your grandmother managed the account.
And now?
A pause. Now you're responsible. I stared across the pasture. The world suddenly felt different, larger.
More dangerous. How many people know? Very few.
Then his voice grew serious.
But they will soon.
I didn't understand what he meant, not until Monday morning, when Marcus called, for the first time in months, and the very first thing he asked wasn't how I was doing. It wasn't how Emma was doing. It wasn't whether I missed Grandma. It was one simple question. Claire, have you looked through the farm records yet? And in that moment, I knew somebody else had finally started reading the paperwork too. I didn't answer Marcus right away. The silence stretched between us. Claire, he said, I'm here.
So, have you looked through the records?
I leaned back in my chair. The question itself was the answer.
Marcus knew something. Not everything.
But enough to suddenly care about a farm he'd mocked 3 days earlier. Why do you ask? I said.
Another pause.
Then a laugh that sounded forced.
Just curious.
Marcus was never curious about anything that didn't involve money. That was my first clue. My second clue came 20 minutes later when Rachel called. She hadn't spoken to me in almost 2 months. Now she wanted lunch. The third clue arrived that evening. A black SUV sat across the street from my house for nearly an hour before driving away. Someone was paying attention. For the first time, Samuel Pierce's warning made sense. People were starting to read the paperwork. The next morning, I drove straight to his office. Samuel occupied a small brick building, downtown that smelled like old paper and coffee. He was 72, silver-haired, and carried himself like a man who had spent his entire life keeping secrets for people who trusted him. I told him about Marcus and Rachel and the SUV. He listened without interrupting. Then he opened a file drawer. Your grandmother expected this. I laughed.
Of course she did.
Samuel handed me a thick folder. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Written by Grandma over the years. Some dated nearly 15 years earlier. What is this?
Documentation.
For what?
In case your family did exactly what they're doing now.
I stared at him. You mean she knew? Samuel smiled sadly.
Eleanor knew people better than anyone I've ever met.
He slid one letter toward me. The date was 8 years old. I unfolded it carefully. If Marcus ever discovers the value of the farm after my death, he will try to convince Claire to sell. He will call it practical. It won't be practical.
It will be greed.
I stopped reading. My chest tightened. She knew. Years before any of this happened, she knew. There were more letters. Dozens. Predictions.
Observations.
Records. Each one describing behavior she'd witnessed over decades. Not because she hated Marcus or Rachel, because she understood them. The same way a farmer understands weather.
Not personal. Just accurate.
Then Samuel handed me one final envelope. This one was sealed. She told me to give you this only if people started circling the farm. I opened it. Inside was a single page. Claire, if you're reading this, then they've finally figured it out. Remember something important.
The farm was never the inheritance.
You were.
Everything else is paperwork.
Love. Grandma. I folded the note carefully. For a moment I couldn't speak. Then Samuel cleared his throat. There's another issue. My head lifted. What issue? The gas company. I frowned. What about them?
The lease expires next year.
I blinked. So?
They want to renew.
That's good, isn't it? It can be. He slid another folder across the desk. The proposed renewal payment sat highlighted in yellow. $3 million. Up front. I stared. $3 million. Just to renew. And annual royalties would continue afterward. The room felt suddenly smaller. Everything about this inheritance was bigger than I had imagined. Much bigger. And apparently someone else knew it too. Because when I got home, Marcus was waiting in my driveway. He climbed from his BMW before I'd even parked. Claire, what are you doing here? He smiled. The same smile he'd used his entire life whenever he wanted something.
We need to talk.
I didn't invite him inside. We stood beside our cars.
I've been thinking about the farm.
I'm sure you have. He ignored the comment.
You know, managing property like that can be difficult.
I'll learn. Or, there it was. The word. Or, the gateway to every bad idea ever packaged as concern. We could partner. I almost laughed. Partner. 3 days ago, he'd called it worthless. Now he wanted partnership.
I'll pass.
His smile disappeared. Claire, don't be stubborn. I'm not. You're a librarian. The words hung between us. Not quite an insult. Not quite respect. Just enough condescension to remind me who Marcus thought I was. You don't understand business. I looked at him carefully. For years that sentence would have hurt. Not anymore. Then it's fortunate I have lawyers. His jaw tightened. You've changed. No, I shook my head. I've started listening. Marcus left angry. Rachel arrived the following week. She tried a different approach. Tears, regret, family unity, childhood memories, everything except honesty. By the time she left, she'd offered to buy half the farm. Then 30%, then 10%. Every number confirmed the same thing. They knew exactly how valuable it was now. The real surprise came from my ex-husband, Derek. We'd been divorced for 6 years, mostly amicably, mostly. Then one evening he called. Congratulations. For what?
The farm.
I closed my eyes. Even he knew. News traveled fast when money was involved.
What do you want, Derek?
He laughed.
Straight to the point. What do you want?
A pause. Then he answered. Nothing. I didn't believe him. But surprisingly, he told the truth. A week later, he showed up carrying pizza for Emma and spent 2 hours helping repair a fence. No requests.
No proposals.
No hidden agenda. Just help. Funny how strangers sometimes become more family than relatives. The real battle arrived 3 months later.
Samuel called early on a Tuesday.
His voice sounded tight. Claire, what happened? Someone filed a legal challenge. My stomach dropped. Who? A pause. Marcus. I closed my eyes. Of course. The challenge claimed Grandma had been mentally impaired when writing the will, that she hadn't understood the value of the farm. That distribution had been unfair. It was ridiculous. Grandma balanced her own investment accounts at 90. She corrected accountants. She read legal filings for fun. But truth wasn't the point. Delay was. Pressure was. Expense was. Marcus hoped I'd settle. Give him a percentage. Buy peace. The court hearings lasted 6 months. 6 exhausting months. Depositions. Documents. Lawyers. Arguments. Every family gathering vanished. Every holiday disappeared. And through all of it, I kept asking myself one question. Why? Marcus already had money. Rachel already had property. Why wasn't enough? The answer arrived unexpectedly during mediation. Marcus finally exploded. Not at me. At the mediator. This isn't fair! The room fell silent. The mediator adjusted his glasses.
What specifically isn't fair?
Marcus pointed toward me. She got everything. Everything. There it was.
The truth.
Not need. Not justice. Not concern. Envy. Pure envy. Because in his mind, inheritance wasn't about what Grandma wanted. It was about winning. And he couldn't stand losing. The case collapsed 2 weeks later. Samuel produced handwritten journals, medical evaluations, witness statements, decades of evidence proving Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. The judge dismissed the challenge completely. Marcus lost. Badly. Afterward, he sat alone in the courthouse hallway. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered something Grandma once said. Some people don't suffer because they lost. They suffer because somebody else didn't. The gas lease renewal finalized that autumn. The signing took place at Blackwood Farm. Not in a boardroom. Not in a city office. At the kitchen table where Grandma used to drink coffee. $3 million transferred that afternoon. Enough money to change lives. Enough money to destroy them too. The difference depended entirely on what came next. I spent months thinking about that. About what Grandma would do. About what kind of person I wanted to become. Then I made my decision. The first thing I did was pay off my house. The second was establish college funds, not just for Emma, for every great-grandchild in the family, including Marcus's kids, including Rachel's. Samuel thought I was crazy.
Maybe I was.
But the children hadn't done anything wrong. The third thing I did surprised everyone. I restored Blackwood Farm.
Not into a mansion.
Not into a luxury estate. Into a community agricultural center. Scholarships. Educational programs. Public gardens. A place where local families could learn, grow food, and build something real. The grand opening happened the following spring. More than 300 people attended. Even Marcus showed up. He stood near the back. Older somehow. Smaller. Not physically. Emotionally. After the ceremony, he approached me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then he looked across the fields. You really did it.
I guess I did.
Another silence. I'm sorry. The words sounded painful. Maybe because they were. I studied his face. For the first time in years, he looked honest. Not polished. Not strategic. Just tired. I know, I said. And, surprisingly, I meant it. Forgiveness isn't something people earn. It's something we choose when carrying anger becomes heavier than setting it down. That didn't mean everything returned to normal. It didn't. Trust takes longer.
Sometimes much longer.
But it was a start. That evening, after everyone left, Emma and I sat on the farmhouse porch watching the sunset. The fields glowed gold. The old barn stood freshly painted, and somewhere in the distance a tractor moved slowly, across land people once called worthless. Emma leaned her head against my shoulder. What do you think Grandma would say? I smiled. I already knew, because I could practically hear her voice. People mistake value for price. For years, everyone saw a broken farm, a collapsing house, an unwanted inheritance. But Grandma saw deeper. She saw potential. She saw patience. She saw character. Most importantly, she saw who would stay long enough to discover what truly mattered. The gas wells weren't the treasure. The money wasn't the treasure. Even the land wasn't the treasure. The treasure was learning that worth isn't determined by appearances. Not in property, not in people, and definitely not in yourself. The family spent years treating me like the least successful person in the room. The quiet one.
The ordinary one.
The woman who shelved books while everyone else chased bigger things. In the end, none of that mattered. Because Grandma's greatest inheritance wasn't hidden beneath the farm. It was hidden inside a lesson. The people who chase shiny things usually miss what holds them up. And the people willing to dig deeper eventually discover what everyone else overlooked. That summer, I hung Grandma's letter inside the farmhouse office.
Visitors ask about it all the time. I always let them read the final line.
The farm was never the inheritance. You were.
Everything else is paperwork.
And every single time, somebody stands there a little longer than they planned. Because deep down, they already know it's true. That's how my grandmother turned a forgotten farm into a fortune. Exposed the greed hiding inside my family, and taught me the difference between value and price. And that's how the inheritance everyone laughed at became the one thing nobody could stop thinking about.